So we have this hole that we want to cover up. As long as it's the smallest hole, regardless of the shape, you just want to even it up. I take a piece of paper and I create a template. So then I take a piece of sheetrock or wallboard that's just about close to the size of the paper, and this is the front, the light gray whitish part. I flip it over to the brown part, which is the backing. I square around the shape of the piece that I've put into the hole that I consider to use for the hole, and then I make sure it's about an inch or so on each side. Then what I do is I cut out that piece first. So that's the outside edges. What I do is I score all four sides all the way across, and then you snap each side and you pull it away from the paper in the front, so you're making an edge. So I scored all four sides, so I just go one side at a time. I pull this off, and that's pretty much that part. So now what I have is this square with the outside thing across. This thing fits pretty good. It's a little tight. So what I would do is I would go in here and I scrape around here a bit. Not a lot, just enough. And then I do the same thing. I do this, I don't know how much I do the same thing on the outside. So I do. Yeah. So there you go. I have a sink here and I put a little water in it. And what I do is, so this is the front and this is the back. I take the front and I put it in the water just enough to cover the bottom. And I just kind of let it hang out here along the edge because I don't want to soak it in there and let it soak up in the whole piece. It's just enough to keep it wet. And you probably can't see it that well, but hopefully my explanation will do it. Okay, so I've mixed up the topping compound, otherwise known as hot mud. I've got the piece here that's been sitting in the water for a little bit. So what I do is I put hot mud or topping compound. This is the dry kind of topping compound that you mix with water. And I put it around all the sides. I put a little bit here on the inside of edges. I put it on the inside. Pretty simply, I just stick this in here. In case you don't know, these bigger blades have a little bend in them. So this is the outside bend. And that's the first coat. Let that dry. The first coat has dried. What we're going to do is prepare to put the second coat on. This is very important. The first thing that you do is you take your scraper or your blade, and you go through and you scrape out all of the edges and the bumps. There's going to be at least 2, if potentially 3 more coats on here, and in order to do the least amount of sanding and have the best looking finish, you want to have as smooth of a surface as possible. So the next thing I do is I take my little sanding sponge here and I take a piece of sandpaper and wrap it around there, and I just very minimally sand the surface, and especially the visible edges and stuff. This is the first coat, so it's not as imperative to be perfectly smooth. Some of the stuff you just can't get out because it needs to be built up a little bit more. And then what I do is I take a just barely moistened cloth and I wipe off from the scraping and sanding that I just had done. And also another nice thing that it does is it creates a little bit of a moisture for the next coat. And so quite simply, I spread. So what you do is on every coat, you'll spread it out further and further, and then I take my blade and yeah. So you want to press and pull at the same time, and I'm probably overdoing it a little bit, but it's probably good for someone that doesn't feel a lot. Once I spread it out, the last coat, the last time I run through the blade, I don't press on it super hard, because what that does is it just opens up the hole again. So that's absolutely perfect like that. And then it'll dry, and then we'll do it again, the exact same thing. This would be the third coat. I've already gone through and scraped it, and I've taken the sandpaper and lightly sanded everything. Kind of spread it out a little bit further on the edges than it was the last time. And then I don't press very hard at all. I'm getting some lines in there. That's the thing about not sanding stuff properly, and just sometimes stuff on the wall. When you go down, the blade will pick stuff up. But that looks pretty good. You also have to watch the bubbles. So the movement of a lot of toppings and patching, it's just like there's a lot of painting and coating. The movement with, I don't know if it's a liquid thing, but it's also just the general movement of air will cause bubbles. So I had some bubbles in there, and I just wanted to go through and get those out. We primed that spot, can't even tell it's there. There's the wall completed. So we have this hole that we want to cover up. There's the wall completed.